Uncovering interests. From your basic mediation training, you know that interests are underlying motivations, needs and concerns, fears and aspirations. Interests define the problem. A position is what you want, and interests are why you want it. And mediators must be highly conscious of the problem, highly conscious of the underlying interests that are motivating the dispute. Identifying needs and interests. Self-represented litigants will often not be able to distinguish between what they want and why they want it. They may say, I want $100,000. And you may try to say, well, why do you want that? Well, I want $100,000. They can't distinguish between the underlying problem often and the solution they come up with to solve it. By using their experience in mediating similar matters, mediators can identify common interests and help the self-represented litigant identify what are their specific concerns and needs. This not only helps to identify the self-represented litigant's underlying interests, but also it helps to educate them about the difference between positions or solutions and interests or the underlying problem. Once you've helped the self-represented litigant to identify their interests, then it's time to help them prioritize them. Interests that are prioritized, meaning put what's most important before what's less important, helps the parties to know what they can trade. In negotiation terms, this is sometimes referred to as the issue mix. Although it's counterintuitive, the more interests on the table, the more issues the parties have to negotiate over, the easier it is to reach a deal, because one party can trade an issue that's less important to them for something that's more important to them, and vice versa. When you help self-represented litigants understand what interests are and understand their own and the other party's interest well, you empower them. You balance power by helping them to be good negotiators. Obstacles to identifying interests with self-represented litigants. Self-represented litigants often have not thought about their interests. This may seem odd, but they often think, as we said, positionally. They think about solutions, not the problem. Self-represented litigants often hide their interests, assuming that revealing them might give power to the other side. This is sometimes the case. Self-represented litigants often cannot distinguish between positions and interests, as we've discussed. And then finally, self-represented litigants often do not know how to explore interests. In this next video, watch as I help Matt, the landlord, in our landlord-tenant dispute, uncover his important interest as well as thinking about the interest of the tenant. It's important to keep an eye on the fact that in this mediation, the interest that he may have stated in his answer, for example, the tenant abiding by the lease, are not really the issues that separate the parties. Let's watch. Thanks for your patience, Matt. So the purpose of this separate meeting is for me to get a deeper understanding of what your concerns are and to really start to think about what, maybe Anna's concerns are too. So I'll be about 10 minutes with you as I was with Anna. First thing is just to remind you that anything that you say to me here, if you want me to keep confidential, I will keep confidential. I won't tell Anna. And that helps me to have a sense of what are the facts and the issues, because the more I know about the case, the more I can help you to see if there's some solution that can work for both of you. So, but the first thing I always like to ask, is there anything that you want to add now that for whatever reason you just didn't add before?
No, I think I pretty much covered it.
Okay, good. All right. So, what are the most important things that you think need to be part of any agreement that we have here? I mean, what are the pieces of it? Not necessarily the solution, but just in terms of the concerns that you think have to be met for you.
Well, first of all, the painting. And because she just did it without my permission, and then even after I told her not to, she just went ahead and did it.
Okay.
And
remind me, before you go on, remind me, what is that concern about? So she painted both the inside of the apartment and the outside, these multicolors. So what's the underlying concern for you?
Well, I mean, honestly, the inside, if she would have told me and she would have sat down and said, hey, I'll repaint it when I leave, or I'll pay for the repainting, we could have worked something out, but it was just that she just went ahead and did it and then tried to charge me for it.
Okay.
And then painted the outside and then screamed in front of my other tenants.
Okay.
I mean,
so for you, it's just the respect that, you
Yeah.
have it in the agreement that you need to get some notice, and she didn't do that.
Well, I mean, yeah, like you said, it's a respect
Okay.
thing because, I've only been doing this for 2 years. My dad was kind of a, for lack of a better term, he was kind of a hard ass.
Mm-hmm.
And she just did it without my permission and yelled in front of the other tenants. I already knew I was kind of young coming into this, and I didn't know how serious people were going to take me. And she just made me look so bad in front of everyone, like I can't do my job.
Okay. And if you had come back, like you said, and you could work something out, the other piece of this, in addition to this respect, is to re-rent it, to be able to then go when she leaves, to be able to get the apartment.
I understand she's an artist, and whatever, different strokes for different folks. I don't care, but I have to flip it when she leaves, and I'm not sure. I don't know what the percentage of the population that's going to want this crazy mural, all-color paintings. And yeah, I get that white's boring and white's lame, but white sells.
Okay. Got it. White sells. What else? In other words, again, what other issue has to be dealt with if we're going to get an agreement today?
The rent is a big one. I understand that that's a lot of money, and sometimes people go through hardships. But again, I didn't want to have to file a case against her. I don't want to have to be this kind of tough bad guy that kicks people out. But I can't just have it known that if you have a spat or disagreement with me, you all of a sudden don't pay me rent, and that's how you work it out. Because then I'm going to have other tenants starting to do that, and it's really just going to cut me out at the knees.
Okay. And
so she kind of put me in that corner when she was like, "Oh, if you don't fix my stove, then I'm not going to pay rent." So I didn't, she kind of forced my hand.
And so I think this is important, right? And maybe it's something you haven't communicated for her. I mean, would you be comfortable if we went back together to tell her how this, especially I think the idea that a lot of it really is sort of making you look bad in front of the tenants I
mean, I thought this was more. I don't know how comfortable I am with sharing it because I don't know if she's going to take it to the other tenants and then how
that's understandable. Yeah, so totally it's up to you if we want to share it. I think that it may not be something she's getting a sense of, right, and that it may help the mediation and down the line to know that this is an issue for you, right? That how you look in front of the other tenants and the fact that you had these rules and that she didn't follow the rules and that made you feel disrespected, and that's part of it. So maybe we'll come back to that, and maybe it's something you'll let me share with her. We'll see. But the idea that it may be confidential. Okay. Let me go back to the painting. So the inside of the apartment, but the door was painted as well. So what's your take on that? I mean, how important is that for you to get it fixed?
I don't want to have to be a tough guy about that, but I have to have the outside. So if people go by, they see it and it all looks uniform, and you can't just be painting on.
So the other thing that's helpful, I think, in these meetings too, is to spend at least a few minutes to think about what you heard on the other side, what her concerns were, and again, my experience in this is that it's if we're going to get an agreement today, it has to work for both sides, and so when we're trying to brainstorm together down the road about some kind of solution, it's really helpful to spend at least a few minutes thinking about what were the concerns that you heard that she expressed. That you think she might need to keep in mind if we're going to get some agreement. Again, we may not, but if we don't, you're back in the court and you have to make your arguments, and maybe it'll take the day and maybe it won't. But again, right now you have control over this process, and if you reach some agreement, it has to work for both you and Anna. So, what were some of the things that you think are concerns that she has articulated?
Well, I think her biggest one is keeping the pet.
Okay.
She said that she loves it and it's like family, so I'm sure it's kind of a package deal.
Okay.
And then I understand her stove is broken and it wants to be fixed, and it's caused her she had to go buy her food at restaurants, so I'm sure she would want her stove fixed, and that's fine. I don't have a problem fixing the stove.
Okay.
I mean, that's what happened. Things break and you call the landlord and I go in and I fix it, so that's not a problem. And then I'm sure she would like to keep her paint. And she might she might want me to pay for it, which I think is ridiculous. If you want to,
Okay.
if you want to paint the inside and you want to tell me that it adds value to your life, that's fine. But don't force that on me. Don't say now I charge you for what I think is valuable.
Okay. Okay. So for her, you think that she cares about the parrot. She cares a lot about having the stove fixed and having the paint, at least inside. That is something that she can keep. She seems to get a lot of joy, out of having this environment that she created. Okay. I mean, I think I agree. I think those are big concerns that she's made. When working with self-represented litigants, it's important to appreciate that the pleadings and even their initial opening statements don't always clearly articulate what they really care about. In other words, what they say are often just clues to what they really care about, not what they actually care about. So in this case, we saw that Matt initially had said that it was the fact that the tenant broke the lease in painting the apartment without his permission that he really cared about. But what we find out is that he might have even allowed that had the tenant asked him. And so for that issue and others that arose in this vignette, it was the respect that he wanted as the landlord that was violated, not so much the lease. And so in this way, the mediator can help to get at the heart of the problem and not just deal with the superficial issues in the dispute.
This concludes part 1 of the Balancing Power module. You will now be directed to exit this module, at which point you may continue to part 2.